I want to make a video on the subject of since it's still existing doesn't mean it's right, and this should be a short video as well. I'm going to make it one because I don't feel good. So yes, um, since it exists doesn't mean it's right. So it's just because life still exists, just because it's still here, just because so many people believe it doesn't mean it's the right thing to believe. Just because a lot of people believe it and a lot of people believe life's great, and just because life still exists doesn't mean it's right. Just because most people are here to think life is great and it still exists because it still exists and they're only here because it exists doesn't mean it's right. Just because things happen a certain way doesn't mean it's right. Because things are happening in the past doesn't mean it's right. Just because we're still here based on negative things doesn't mean the past was right, because the past didn't have to exist to begin with. And even though we're forced to exist, the bad things in the past didn't have to exist to get to a future that we kind of perceive to be better. And the best future would be if there were no sentient beings suffering. And the only way you're not going to suffer as a sentient being or be deprivated, because you're not accomplishing anything otherwise anyway, is to not exist. So that's the best outcome, and just because we still exist, you're basing that on the fact that existing is the right thing to do to begin with. So you're basing it off of a false premise to begin with, and that's obviously no way to view existence. It's existing the way it's existing now, but just because it happened a certain way in the past and it's still here doesn't mean what we're doing now is right, and doesn't mean rationalize the past as being something that's right in the past. It just happened to have happened in the past. It's happening to happen now, and life happens to still exist, and it still happens to exist with all of its horribleness and its attrition rates, and it's existing, but you don't realize just how many people are dying. You're just seeing the things that happen to make it. You didn't see all the dead, all its dead brethren, laying dead in the sea or on the in the grass, all the dead insects, all the things being eaten. You want to know why? Because they're no longer here, and you're only seeing the things that are here. And if it's here, therefore, all of a sudden, it's a confirmation bias. It exists, therefore, it's right. It doesn't mean it's right. It just means it exists, and it still exists. And just because it exists, it doesn't mean it has any rationalization that it's right, or that it couldn't have been better off if it were some other way. But it's the way it's existing, and since we still exist, and it's only going to happen a certain way, doesn't mean what we're doing is right, because there's always the solution to fix the problem that we find something wrong with. And since there's something wrong here, I stubbed my toe, and that happened because I thought something was right. Now all of a sudden something's wrong. I can realize I can fix the problem. And the fixing the problem is part of the solution to fixing the problem as a whole. And the fixing the problem as a whole is to make sure I don't stub my toe again. If I don't have to stub my toe again, that's a good thing. That's a net gain, generally speaking. It's avoiding a negative. It's a net gain, at least relatively speaking. And the only way to really permanently fix that problem, to make sure 100% I'm not going to stub my toe again and feel anything, is if I no longer exist. And that's the only real solution to the problem of existence. That's the only real solution to fixing the problem as a whole, is to avoid this game entirely. Sorry if my voice is kind of nasally. Just trying my best to make it understandable for everyone. So yes, that's really it. Just because it still exists doesn't rationalize it. It can end at any moment anyway, right? It could exist right now, but at any moment it could just end. It could just end, right? Right? It could just end. And does that mean it's right? I think that's the right solution. Because right at that point, once it's started, the only thing you can really do is make it worse or make it end. And make it end is the one side that's the bright side. The side that's the best side is the side where it's no longer going to be a problem. So once it exists, it's either making more exist and making it worse, more possibility for more pain and more suffering, or there's a possibility where you could just end it all immediately, or try your best to go through the direction of ending it, or continuing it and expanding it, or whatever it may be. Continuing what you have, obviously that's not going to happen. It's going to be more or less. Things are constantly moving on the scale of more or less. It's never staying right in the middle. There's always vibrations causing something to move back and forth, because that's how we exist. We exist on vibrations and things moving at the speed of light, moving back and forth, vibrating. They're either going more or less. They're either going left or right, up or down. They're going back and forth. That's the point. And it's about making that back and forth going the right way. Making the back and forth be either back or forth. In the back or forth, there's either a right one or a wrong one. Sort of like there's a attract and repulse, or a left and a right, or an up and a down, or a northeast and a south west, and a northwest and a southeast. Um, there's one or the other. You're going back or forth. There's no staying in the middle. And there's either you're going in the right direction or you're going in the wrong one. And there's nothing else you can really do. So it's about making the best of that circumstance. And the best of the circumstance is making sure it's better for everyone. And better for everyone is the life game as a whole. And better for everyone is complete annihilation in the end. But obviously, the best solution, obviously annihilation if it's possible. But otherwise, if it's not possible, since it's not really possible at this moment in time, and if it were, you wouldn't even know it because it'd already be over, and it'd be, when it started, it'd be over as quickly as you can exist. You can think about it before you can even have another thought. And that's the way that in the existence, annihilation, but instant annihilation, you wouldn't even know it. And it's for the best of everyone. But since it's not possible, antinatalism is obviously the choice you have to choose to make sure you can slowly decline the population enough so that it can slowly wither away on its own. And that's exactly what we're trying to do. If we can't get an immediate solution, we have to take the gradual solution. So, yeah. But since it's still here doesn't mean it's right. It doesn't rationalize anything. Since a guy's raping someone doesn't mean what he's doing is right. It doesn't rationalize because he happens to be raping, therefore him doing his raping means his raping at the moment in time is right. Him doing it just happens to rationalize it because it exists. No, because he got away with it and he doesn't realize it doesn't mean it's right. Just because he did this or did that doesn't mean anything. It means, doesn't mean it's right or wrong. It doesn't mean it's right though. If it doesn't mean it's not, if it doesn't mean it's wrong, it doesn't mean it's right. The value judgment comes automatically. The value judgment is something that happens automatically. It doesn't need our value judgment. It's sort of like it doesn't need us to know that something else is suffering. It doesn't need our value judgment. It happens automatically. In and of itself, it exists. Back and forth. It's either going left or right. It exists regardless. Just because it exists doesn't mean it's right, and it doesn't rationalize it just because it's happening right now. But it doesn't mean it's right or wrong. But if it doesn't mean it's wrong, it doesn't mean it's right either. But it doesn't mean it's right in the end. And yes, things are moving back and forth, and that's the only way they can function in the end. You're either going more or less. The more or less is usually more in the right direction, and whatever it may be you're applying the more or less to. It doesn't matter. What matters is whatever it may be that's more or less is it's going to either be coming more because more of this means more deprivation and more harm, or less of it means more deprivation and more harm. And that's what really matters. More but and more pain, or less and more pain, or left or right, left with more pain or right with more pain, or left with less pain or right with less pain. It's one or the other. And that's how the vibrations of existence work, of going back and forth and so on and so forth. So if I have anything else to say on the subject, I'll mention it in another video. But that's essentially the basic idea. And once again, I apologize for my voice. Thank you. Until next time, bye.